It's the Free Relief Golf Podcast. Thanks to the Blue Wire Hustle program, this is the place where listeners can explore the hidden cost of elite amateur golf. It'll always cost nothing to get some free relief, so let's get on with it, shall we? Hello and welcome back to the Free Relief Golf Podcast. I'm Freddie, and as always I hope you're safe and well. This episode is the sixth in a series of episodes that I initially set out to do when I first created the Free Relief Golf Podcast. I've been playing some tournaments, and I'm looking to outline the cost of playing in those events and report back to you, the listener, so you can get a first-hand experience of what it would cost you to do the same. This time round, we were playing Regional Open qualifying at St Anne's Old Links in Blackpool. There's quite a lot of detail to cover, and I want to fly through it, so let's quickly get into it. So today we'll be talking about Regional Open qualifying once more, specifically 2021 Regional Open qualifying. Now in the past we have spoken about 2019 Open qualifying. You go check out that episode if you so wish, but today we are talking about the 2021 edition. So what is it? Well, Regional Open qualifying is the first stage of qualifying for the Open Championship, which is one of four major championships in men's professional golf and has been happening since 1860. In 2022, it will be happening in St Andrews, and it will be the 150th edition of the competition. And 150 is the operative number because £150 is what it will cost you to enter, and competitors get straight into the field on a first-come, first-served basis, no dramas. But what do you get for the £150 entry fee? We will cover the usual headings of golf, merchandise and food to find out, and we'll get straight into golf now. So in terms of the golf offering, you get one free practice round, and in 2021 I was competing at St Anne's Old Links, which is in Lytham, right next to Blackpool, and if you don't already know, it is a place of massive golfing significance. You've got so many open venues in the area on that west coast of England, so many great links courses, and St Anne's Old Links, while it's not directly on the sea, it's right near it. It's got the sandy soil, exactly as you would expect a links to have. It's a proper venue. And you get a free practice round on it. So for the practice round, you were booked in amongst the members. There were no special privileges given to the people competing. I think we had a three-board friendly local ladies playing behind us. And in the practice round, I played with Lewis, who was a Scottish amateur himself, who'd made the journey all the way down to Blackpool. It was the nearest venue that we had. But it was good to see another person from Scotland making the trip. And a pro called Mike, who, by a sheer coincidence, I ended up playing with in the tournament the next day. You can have an extra practice round, but it will cost the full green fee, which in high season in 2022 will cost you £128, and that is only available Monday to Friday. They don't allow visitors to play on the weekends, so it's that kind of club. It's got that prestige to it. And it was tough to put the practice round at a convenient time because we ended up having our practice round on the Thursday before playing the tournament proper on the Sunday. And players and caddies weren't allowed on the site on Friday or the Saturday, which was the first. There were 2 days of qualifying, on the Saturday and the Sunday. Friday, the course was completely closed for the greenkeepers to set everything up, I suppose. So the earliest we could actually practice for the Sunday was on the Thursday, which made things slightly awkward, but it was all due to COVID restrictions, and the RNA had things in hand, and you trusted their judgment. It was just something different to adjust to, I suppose. But you get the one practice round, free guaranteed, and you get one guaranteed tournament round. And potentially, for the entry fee, you can have 3 tournament rounds if you as a player were to make it to final qualifying as well, which is 36 holes. Final qualifying took place on the Tuesday after, with the option of another practice round on the Monday. And to be fair, players should probably take up this option, as the course in final qualifying used tees which was slightly further back. So it might have affected landing areas off the tee and distances of approach shots into greens. But so with that extra practice round, if you made final qualifying, you could potentially have 5 rounds of golf for your £150 entry fee. Now, at St Anne's for regional qualifying, it was one of 4 venues used last year for 2021 qualifying in total. There was St Anne's Old Links, West Lancs, or West Lancashire, Notts Hollingwell and Prince's. But for regional qualifying at St Anne's, there are around 25 players who made the cut out of 144 starting in the field. Now, normally, as we get onto, because later there's going to be a chat with my dad in this episode, he is the special guest for today. But when we competed in 2019 at Panmure, the field was around 90, maybe it was 91, and there were about 13 spots. So because of the condensed venues, there are only 4 venues in play rather than 13 regional venues. There were more spots available, so instead of 13 at Panmure, there were actually 25 available at St Anne's, and indeed the other 3 venues as well. It would have been around that amount who made it through to final qualifying. As it goes at St Anne's, there was a playoff between 19 players for 8 spots into final qualifying. All of the players finished on 1 under par in regional qualifying, and the playoff continued until nearly 11 p.m. at night, and then had to continue the next morning. It lasted 8 holes in total. And for the record, to achieve a top 3 finish in final qualifying at St Anne's Old Links, you needed to shoot 13 under par over 2 rounds to make it to the Open proper. And for sure, this was the lowest scoring out of any of the 4 venues. I believe Prince's, it was really close to par, and the others were modestly under par as well, with Hollingwell and West Lancs. So St Anne's, by all accounts, was playing the easiest at the time, but I guess they're all in different places, different weather conditions. You can never quite tell. But 13 under would have got you into the Open at St Anne's through final qualifying this year. Now, in terms of the practice area offering, at St Anne's Old Links, they had Titleist Pro V1 and Pro V1X balls. You had access to a grass driving range and a smoothly run shuttle to reach it, as it would have been quite some distance to walk. And it definitely, if you were walking without a shuttle service, which took you around the perimeter of the course, it would have caused interference with those already on the course, as you would have had to walk across the 3rd hole and alongside the 4th and 5th holes. So it would have been chaos if the RNA hadn't laid on a shuttle, but of course they did because they're the RNA. Range balls are included in your entry fee, and outside the clubhouse there was a decent pitching green and a massive putting green, so you could get in all the practice and have your space to do so, which is probably why it was selected as a regional and final qualifying venue in COVID times. It gave people lots of space to do their thing. And again, there were no stingy distributions of range balls, as we've seen in a lot of the tournaments last year. I think it was only St George's for the South East of England links where they were stingy with range balls, but everywhere, pretty much no stingy distributions. They just gave you a big bucket, let you have what you wanted, the real sign of a proper tournament. In terms of yardage books, no books were provided for the practice round, and this is kind of interesting. It cost me £8.50 for a standard book. But on the tournament day, they provided you with properly detailed books supplied by Clare Golf. And you found out you had these in the welcome pack that you received on the day as you entered the tournament venue. And there were temperature checks going on, all the necessary COVID regulations being followed. But we also got the welcome pack with local rules, competitor information, some teas in there with Open Qualifying Series on, pitch marks, and also a really professional looking yardage book with everything you needed on it. If anything, perhaps too much on it, because in the actual tournament proper I used my original book, which I've made notes in it during the practice round, but it's still nice to have that professional one to have access to and look back on as a memento of the day. I'll say this is an interesting point because we had the chance to offer feedback on regional qualifying maybe a year or so ago after I competed in 2019. And I recall one of the questions regarding the demand for professional yardage books being supplied at regional. So previously, regional qualifying, you just got a yardage book from the pro shop, and only at final qualifying would you be provided with such a service. But this time they bundled everything together, regional and final, and they gave all the regional competitors a proper yardage book, which I thought was a nice touch. And it's glad to see the RNA are actively seeking feedback and then also acting upon it. Now, we stayed at a hotel, part of the Village Hotel group in Blackpool, and the hotel itself had golf facilities. It had a driving range and it had a golf course. So throughout the week we had 3 range sessions, because on the Friday and Saturday we weren't allowed to the course anyway, so we were just keeping topped up with practice. We had 3 range sessions, which actually came to £18 total. The The balls were expensive. £6 a bucket. It was probably a 50 ball bucket as well. It's just not. It's not on, but that was the kind of hotel it was. We were treating ourselves, me and my dad having a special trip away, and we get more into that later on with the interview with Dad, so stay tuned for that if you want to hear more of it. But we had the range sessions and we played some holes on the course as a warm-up on the Saturday just to make sure that I could still play golf on a golf course before the qualifying started on the Sunday. The green fee for hotel guests was £25 and the course, which was called Heron's Reach, it was in good condition. It was worth having a game on, but it fell by the wayside in comparison to St Anne's Old Links. It's not that kind of course. It was very much a resort course. And that was everything you needed to know about the golf. And in terms of the merchandise, the last few episodes, there haven't been many things to discuss in terms of merchandise because Scottish Amateur and South East of England Links did not provide merchandise. But Regional Open qualifying is a different kettle of fish. We talk about this later in our chat, but the blue ribbon. Volunteers had pink ribbons on the day which they wore on their hats or their clothes just so you could find them, I suppose, without going up close to them and having to interact, and it avoided any opportunity to spread germs. But players and caddies had blue ribbons, and we've still kept hold of ours, me and my dad, and it was just a nice touch, and it's nice to still be able to wear them. And people occasionally ask, and you can just recall the memory, and it had a practical use at the time, but it also has a sentimental value now looking back. As I just previously said, we had a welcome pack with all the local rules and the pitch mark repairers and the tees, and we also received a group number sticker for on-course identification. And I'm guessing this is for any official pictures that were being taken so they could identify players. I guess it's also for the scorers that were out there taking our scores every 3 holes for the official leaderboards that were happening on the website for people to keep track of. We were Group 24, so I had a blue 24 sticker to put on my golf bag, and it's still there. It stuck really well. And you're either going to receive a blue, yellow or red sticker, like it matters, but again, it's another thing that happens at a proper tournament, which you wouldn't even think about when you're entering it, but it happens and it makes you feel special. And then finally talking about the food, you know you're at an event when food is supplied on the 1st and the 10th tees. In this case, bananas were supplied on the 1st and 10th tees. If you want to hear more about opinions on bananas, go back to the Eden tournament episode. I discussed with my friend James plenty about bananas. But there was water on every 1st and 10th tee too. And not just plastic bottles of water, these were cans of water. The revolution has well and truly begun with the RNA and cans of water. If you go to the Open and spectate, you may well have done so in the last few years at Carnoustie or Portrush or St George's last year. But the RNA really are pushing having reusable canisters to have your water now. And at regional qualifying, it was more of the same. Have cans of water. They're potentially reusable. These were kind of like Coke cans of water, not necessarily an actual reusable canister, but they're better for the environment than plastic, so it's a start. And there was a food stall set up. Normally there are food stalls set up for final qualifying, but because it was all wrapped into one, you got the full experience at regional this time as well, despite there not being fans allowed in, or I say fans, spectators, anyone who wanted to spectate the golf because of COVID. But they still had a food stall set up, and after the actual round, the tournament proper on the Sunday, we did have a post-round cheeseburger at the fairly reasonable rate of £5. And in general, certainly having the final qualifying happening on the Tuesday after the Saturday and Sunday regional qualifiers, by having it all blended into one, it did make regional feel more special. I wonder if it took away from final qualifying. Spoiler, I didn't make it to final qualifying. But it did certainly feel like it elevated regional qualifying into something a bit higher than perhaps what it felt like in 2019. In 2019 it felt great, so that's a big compliment. So that's the golf merch and food, everything you need to know about it. When we come back, I'm going to cover the travel and accommodation because there's a lot to cover with that. See you in a second. So as we've been saying, In terms of travel and accommodation, well, this was a lot of faff. It was the most faff we had to deal with throughout the whole year out of any of the tournaments in terms of organising, because it was driving, but it was driving a long distance as well. Having the most northerly venue in Blackpool was an interesting decision by the R&A, and I would love to hear the reasons for why that was the case, because they used all the normal final qualifying venues except the Fairmont St Andrews, which they swapped with West Lancs, which meant that anyone wanting to compete from Scotland in regional open qualifying had to make a big trip down to Blackpool, which for us coming from St Andrews was a 4.5 hour drive. But I believe the week before they'd had the British Amateur and it was up at Nairn last year in 2021. So that's an extra couple of hours added on straight away. So for a lot of these boys, if they'd had a run in the British Amateur, they were definitely going to then pass up a 7 or an 8 hour drive just down to Blackpool to have potentially one round of qualifying golf to try and make the final. Logistically, it probably didn't make sense for a lot of Scottish people to try and compete in this. And I'm sure there are reasons for why this happened. I'm sure in the way the R&A were going about trying to cater for everyone with the COVID limitations, there may have been other options, but I'm sure they would also just had to weigh up lesser of two evils. Blackpool probably was accessible to most people, and we just had to suck it up. No tournament could be a perfect logistical setup for everyone, I suppose. And in this case, it was not perfect, because it took up 2 tanks of petrol, which at the time came to about £80. And as I say, it was a 4.5 hour drive without stops down to Blackpool. So in total, 9 hours of driving to get there and back. It's not ideal. It was worth it for the adventure. We've had more interesting trips, like when we got to Panmure before I drove a car, and we had to use train and bus and taxi and all these different... It was properly planes, trains, automobiles situation. So me and my dad personally didn't mind doing it for the adventure, but I can see why a lot of people would have turned it down for logistical reasons. And for accommodation, as I've previously mentioned, we stayed in a village hotel in Blackpool, and it was 5 nights, 5 breakfasts that came with that. We arrived on the Thursday and we ended up leaving on the Tuesday. And it was perhaps a bit more of a decadent experience. As I say, it was attached to a golf club. It had all the facilities. It had a gym. It had a swimming pool. Perhaps more decadent than I'd normally go for when I'm scrimping and saving for all the other tournaments. But with my dad involved and my mum helping out with the booking of the hotel, it was like a holiday, and we did treat ourselves. In total, it came to just over £600, and my share of it was just over £300, and that's for all the facilities. You get your bed, obviously, you get your breakfast. I think it was an extra, actually, in addition to that. It was £7.50 a day per person. And the car parking was £5 extra per weekday. But as I say, you got the gym and the pool, and there was also Starbucks on site, so you had all the facilities, and I guess you were paying through the nose for it, but it was worth it. Now, over the 5 nights, we had 5 different dinners, not at the village hotel because they're an absolute shambles. And the dinner service was the only real negative of the village hotel. We actually had the practice round on the Thursday. We'd driven down that day as well. We were very tired. We went to the village hotel and sat down, did not get served for about 45 minutes, ended up having Domino's pizza. We ended up having Domino's pizza 2 days on our trip. We ended up going to a curry house called the Billash, which was recommended to us by a friend who knows their curries, and they really do, because the Billash was excellent. We said we'd go back if I qualified on the Sunday. I didn't qualify, and we still went back. Completely worth it. And one of the days we got a fish and chips as well from St Anne's. Lovely little town right on the seaside. It was a great spot, and you can't beat fish and chips. So as I said, the breakfast was £7.50 extra. Add that up over the 5 days, it came to £75 total. But for me, that's £37.50 for my share. And that is already incorporated. When I said just over £300, that is including the extra breakfast that we had. So as you can tell, it's a bit messier this week with travel and accommodation, talking that through, because it was more of a holiday setup rather than just purely for the golfing, and because it was awkward over a couple of days. It was worth staying somewhere with all the comforts. But this does truly reflect in the total cost of regional open qualifying for me. When you add up the entry, the golf, the travel, the accommodation, the dinner, it was a £150 entry fee. the golf with the yardage book costs and the driving range costs plus a green fee at the Heron's Reach golf course, that came to £43. The travelling with 2 tanks of petrol, £80. The accommodation was just over £300 in total, and all the dinners added up came to just over £80, and altogether added up, for me, that was £662.65. And that's not even including bits and bobs, like snacks for the golf bag to keep you going, the casual coffees at Starbucks, the £5 cheeseburgers on the tournament site, and as you will hear, a fair amount of later with the interview with my dad, it doesn't include our day out with ice creams at Blackpool Seafront. Now, if I'd made final qualifying, the cost, when you include the extra dinner, the extra parking, the extra night stay, that would have gone up from 662 to 752 for the extra night. But, of course, it is worth saying we stayed at a village hotel with all the facilities, and you could get accommodation that was cheaper without the golf and gym facilities. So it'd be much easier to find a basic or cheaper alternative. So there's the Lytham St Anne's Travel Lodge, and it is worth noting, if you haven't been to the area before, Lytham and St Anne's are different towns, and there is a big rivalry between the towns, as we'd learnt while staying there and being given a tour by my friends. However, the Travel Lodge does not account for this. It's just called the Lytham St Anne's Travel Lodge, and it was £75 total a night for 2 people sharing one room, so each person that would be £37.50, and that includes breakfast and Wi-Fi, so all the basics that you need for £75 a night. And the Blackpool Travel Lodge, for the record, is a similar price. Now, if you were to stay at a more basic venue and just do regional qualifying, the total would come out to just over £500 with all your travel and entry and all the costs we said earlier, but just the changing of the accommodation. So it comes out as cheaper, but you don't get the golf and gym access, which is helpful, and you also are without car parking, which can be an issue, especially in the height of summer at a seaside town. And then on top of that, if you were to make final qualifying, the total would come up, when you add on an extra night and breakfast, it would add up to £541, and again, the parking is not included. But that's still just over £200 cheaper, staying in the Travel Lodge as opposed to the Village Hotel in Blackpool. And you're getting all the same golf offering anyway in the same place, so it'd certainly be worth doing it that way if you're trying to do it on more of a budget. Which leads us to the overall experience rating, the bit that you've all come to see. Just to refresh your memories, I've scored out of 5 across 11 different areas, and this is so I can ultimately rank the events and compare them against each other at the end of the season. Those 11 areas are hospitality, practice facilities, practice round offering, course condition, course layout, course setup, organisation, communication, location, parking and weather. Regional Open qualifying for me was, out of 55, it scored 53.5. It literally lost 1.5. It was 5s across the board, and it only lost marks for course layout. And even this is a little bit snooty to take marks off for, because in the practice round with Lewis and Mike, we remarked that every green looked similar, in the sense that every green had bunkers guarding the fronts, and every green was thin and long, but the backs of the greens were unguarded. It's not even an aesthetic choice, it's just a golf course architectural comment. And I've taken away some points from that because otherwise it would just be flawless marks across the field. Perhaps you could say some of the holes blend into one. It could be hard to remember some of them, but that really is trying to find crumbs of negativity in what is otherwise a purely positive tournament experience. The practice facilities lost half a mark just for being so far away. They provided a shuttle to deal with that, but even then, that still is a bit awkward, and you have to factor it into your day. You could easily forget it and suddenly be rushed for your preparations. And because the chipping area, pitching area, it was small, and it was impractical for more than 3 or so players to use at once. The putting green was massive, so you could definitely spend lots of time on there, but with COVID and everyone was trying to stay away, the chipping and pitching green, it would have been nice if it was bigger, but again, that is really pedantic. But that's why I'm here. I'm here to be a bit pedantic. So in summary, it's a long trip to get to St Anne's from St Andrews. And the fact that there was no easier logistical option for Scotland-based golfers this year, such as the Fairmont St Andrews, It was an interesting decision by the RNA, which I'm sure there is a reasonable explanation for. However, regional open qualifying and final open qualifying is quite simply one of the premier events an amateur can play, and it feels like it in every way. Thus, the rating score I've given it is the best of any tournament I've played so far this year, and you're treated in a special manner and given the full professional experience, and this all helps add to the overall dream-chasing sensation, whereby it feels like the Open, one of professional golf's 4 major championships, as I said, is well and truly within your grasp if you play to your potential. I'd certainly recommend that all amateurs with a handicap of scratch or better, or with the appropriate world ranking, give it a go at least once. That's now my second time doing it, but do it at least once. And then I'll stop going on at you. With all that being said, those are all the facts and numbers that you need to know about my experience with Regional Open qualifying in 2021. I've said Regional Open qualifying way too much. Let's have a lighter conversation with my dad who caddied for me during that tournament. Here you go. Okay, and here we are, the moment you've all been hanging on and waiting for. We have the special guest. He's been on this podcast before. It's my father, Rob Lawrence. Dad, how are you?
I'm very well. It's good to be back. I am a veteran of this podcast now, having done it once before.
Absolutely. And how did you cope with the fame after the last Open podcast that we did, which covered our 2019 escapades?
It was difficult, but I did manage to do it, no problem at all. You know, a few autographs, but on the whole, I managed it perfectly.
Perfect. You kept it classy, and I'm glad to hear that.
No problem.
So that last time we spoke about our first experience of Open qualifying, which was at what happened in 2019 at Pamir.
Yeah.
And that was a good time. And if the listeners have not heard that podcast yet, they should definitely go check it out, right?
Absolutely. It's one of the greatest podcasts ever made.
Yeah, quite right. Well, except for this one.
Of course, we always get better.
Of course, because today we are talking about how 2021 Open qualifying went. And I think it's safe to say we definitely would have done Open qualifying in 2020 had it been happening.
Yeah.
But the Open was cancelled due to COVID. And I guess that was a fun time for everyone. But it meant that in 2021 we got to be even more appreciative of the tournament and the situation than maybe we would have been otherwise. So yeah, let's kick it off. Yes, epic indeed. And we're going to get into it. So let's kick it off. I asked you this last time, and as I've just been saying in the bulk of this podcast, that it does come to more than the entry fee, substantially more the way things worked out this year. But by itself, do you think that playing regional qualifying is worth the £150 entry fee?
Yes, I do. As always, as I said last time, it's the best competition in the world. So £150, well worth every penny. And
of course, this time was slightly different given the COVID limitations with planning. Before we got to qualify at Pamir, which, for people who don't know, is near Carnoustie, which isn't far from St Andrews. So while we had some interesting travel arrangements that time, it was still probably much cheaper and easier to organise than 2021 Open qualifying ended up being. Would that be fair to say?
It would be fair to say, yes. As I said, it was an epic journey.
An epic journey. So, of course, people already know, having listened to the bulk of this podcast, but 2021 Open qualifying, we went down to Blackpool, and we've only ever been there once before for a karate tournament. We've never been there for golf, but it is quite the golfing paradise, really. There's so many great courses in the area, and we were competing at St Anne's Old Links. When I say 2021 Open qualifying, what's the first image that springs to mind when you recall the day itself, but also our experience down in Blackpool?
Well, not realising that we were next to a zoo. That was quite interesting. wondering what that noise was that sounded like an elephant.
that sound like an elephant. So we should clarify that this was the hotel that we stayed in. We stayed in I believe the brand is Village Hotel.
It was, yeah.
And we were hearing strange noises and we weren't quite sure. And the hotel was connected with a golf course. But next to that golf course, it turns out, was it Blackpool Zoo? Or was it a wider reaching name than that?
It was a wider reaching name, which escapes me at the moment. But put it this way, when we mentioned it to your mother that we heard elephants, she said, well, you would do because your hotel's next to a zoo.
And we should clarify that Mum found the hotel for us.
Yeah, she's the PA. She finds all the hotels.
Perfect. Yeah. Certainly in this instance. That's an interesting first thing to spring to mind. I'm sure people were not expecting that.
They weren't expecting that. The second thing then I'm going to say is when we went to the Blackpool Tower on the sea.
The Blackpool Tower. Right, so not much golf related.
Nothing golf related, but Blackpool Tower where they do Strictly Come Dancing.
Yeah, no, that was definitely a pleasant day. I think in terms of open qualifying, perhaps, people go visit Blackpool if they so wish. And this year, luckily, we won't, for 2022 qualifying, we will not have to be visiting Blackpool anytime soon because all the qualifying is back to the original arrangement of local qualifying and final. And our local this year would be Panmure again, and the final would be Fairmont St Andrews, would be our nearest one. So we wouldn't have to make this trip. But yeah, in case you haven't understood already, Blackpool was well all right. And we actually stayed in Blackpool, but we also spent a lot of time in St Anne's visiting friends and having a little scout of all the courses, including Lytham St Anne's, which proved quite difficult to get in and have a walk around. There's a footpath that goes through one section, so we got a taste of it, but maybe we'll have to go back there and try and experience that.
Yeah. Yeah, very, very a great area for golf, but I did like Blackpool seafront.
It compares it. It definitely blew Southend on seafront.
Yeah,
out of water.
It's better than Southend. The city of Southend, much better than that.
Much better than the city of Southend. You heard it here first. Okay, well, so how about the golf? So what is the first image that springs to mind when you recall Open qualifying 2021 at St Anne's Old Links? So we had the practice round, and then there was a few days gap in between just with the way things worked out logistically, and we were playing on the Sunday. What stands out to you? It could be from practice, it can be from the actual day itself.
Yeah, I mean, I like the big scoreboard.
Yeah.
Which obviously at Panmure we didn't have the big scoreboard, but this, as you've alluded to, this was a bit different where it was set up for the final qualifier as well. So we had the big scoreboard and, always impressive when you walk into something like that and see the big scoreboard with, the Open on it. And again, it's always first class there, isn't it? The course is immaculate. It just seems like if it's anything to do with the Open, everything is 10 times better than it normally would. It's just it's just fabulous.
The RNA know how to organise the tournament, don't they?
They certainly do. But I'll tell you what I really liked. I thought the volunteers were fantastic. Right from the beginning when we go in, it was, again, we had to go in and it was a COVID setup. And the first lady that you met giving out the information was a lovely lady. And I just thought everybody we bumped into there, the volunteers, were first class. Really, really, really great.
Yeah, it did feel, certainly on the tournament day, I think the practice day was slightly more relaxed to get in there. But on the tournament day, it was a bit like Fort Knox trying to get through it, wasn't it? Trying to crack safes and get through doors. I remember the regulations really scaring me in terms of not wanting to miss anything. You had to have your lateral flow test. You had to test negative. And that was a scary thought, thinking that we'd driven however long it was, 4.5, 5 hours down to Blackpool, and you could test positive straight before it, and that's you out of the tournament. But we had to go in. If the people who know St Anne's Old Links, it's a lovely clubhouse, isn't it? Not that we saw lots of it given the restrictions, but from outside it's a beautiful building. And we went in from the back entrance and they had all these temporary structures, but you had to go through. I think they took our temperature. They gave us our welcome pack, and that had all the local rules, all the information we needed, competitor information. And it had T-pegs and pitch mark repairers.
We love a T-peg.
We love a T-peg, yeah, especially when it's got open qualifying series written on it. We don't use those T-pegs.
No, we never use them.
At that point as well, they also gave us possibly the best bit of merchandise I received last year. I think it's perhaps one of your favourite bits of merchandise ever as well, the ribbons.
The blue ribbon. Well, I had a blue. What did you have blue?
I had blue. So I think it was players and caddies got blue ribbons and it was volunteers had pink.
Okay, yeah. I've still got mine on my waterproofs.
Yeah, and I've got mine on my hat. And it's just a nice little keepsake, really. Without it, it's quite subtle. Yeah. It's not saying, here, I played the Open, but people do ask about it, and it's nice to be able to mention it. And on the day, I guess it was useful and practical to be able to distinguish between people and know who you could go up and ask from a distance without having to get up really close to them to spread your germs, potentially. But yeah, again, that comes back to the RNA having the nice touches, right?
Yeah. As I always say, I just think they know how to do it. And, always first class, the RNA, how they go about their work. Really good fun.
And of course, you said they had the big leaderboard like they normally do at final qualifying. And because everything was combined into, just the 4 venues, so the normal 4 final qualifying venues with the Fairmont St Andrews actually not included this time, and I think that swap for West Lancs on this occasion.
Yeah.
But so they had the full final qualifying setup already laid out, and that included a burger van as well.
Well, the burger van was one of the highlights after we finished. Thought it was tremendous.
It was definitely nice to get a burger.
After we finished, yeah, very good.
And again, that's when you know you're at a proper tournament. I suppose when we went around, during the round, there were volunteers who were taking the scores as well. Every 3 holes, I believe it was, they were trying to update the leaderboards without us having to go on our phones, which again felt very professional. Yeah. But yeah, you know you're at an event with proper players when there's a burger stand for spectators to have food. And even then, spectators weren't allowed, were they? There was no spectators allowed on site. So it was purely for players, caddies and volunteers.
Yeah. That's right. Yeah, no spectators.
Well, hopefully that will change this year.
Yeah.
So I would actually say that one of my predominant memories was teeing off the first at St Anne's Old Links in the practice round with Lewis, Scottish Lewis, and we had a pleasant round. But on that first tee, getting to aim at Blackpool Tower. So it was, you really could not get away from the fact you were in Blackpool at any point during that tournament. But I thought that was that certainly stands out to me. Yeah. I don't know if it made me feel like I was in a big tournament, but it was definitely interesting.
Yeah.
So in terms of the day itself and the arrangement that St Anne's Links had in terms of the golf offering with the driving range and the clubhouse and the course, what were your observations? How did you find it?
Well, when we arrived, I wasn't 100% sure how we were going to get to the driving range in time, to make the long trek to it and back. But then we realised that we were going to get driven there by a buggy.
In a shuttle. You're right. So it must have been next to the 4th hole. So it could easily have been a mile away, right?
Yeah.
Or it was a substantial amount of yards away. So it was definitely handy to have that shuttle bus service in operation. Yeah. Because otherwise, you're right, we would have missed our tee time.
And I do recall it being a bumpy journey as well.
I thought it was as well driven as it could be on golf roads, but on shell pathways.
Yeah, well, I nearly lost your clubs once, but other than that, it was a good... Yeah, we got there, no problem. And, of course, the practice facility... again, first class, fantastic golf balls to use.
Yeah, I think there were Titleist Pro V1Xs again on the range. I mean,
just, and you got plenty of time. You got those big Rolex watches to give you the time. I like them; they're good.
So you cannot miss it. How did it feel as a caddy? You've got your blue ribbon on. How did it feel standing on that range, just with everyone else hitting balls?
Well, you feel like well, I was going to say feel like a player, but I'm not a player. But you feel, you're part of it, of something that's a fantastic experience. Yeah, I like it. I really do like it.
And of course, we shouldn't forget that on the range they had buckets of water to clean our clubs. But
that's correct. Yeah.
If I remember rightly, on the day I was forgetting that there were buckets of water because I kept spitting on my clubs to clean them, even though there were buckets of water right there. Yeah. So I guess I should have just left that to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think I was in awe and probably went a bit quiet for a while if you were spitting on your clubs. Probably wasn't doing the job right.
Yeah, potentially.
Yeah.
But we had good fun in the tournament round proper. What stood out to you on that tournament day? We played with... Who did we play with? We played with Mike, who was a professional.
Yeah, well, and obviously the treat...
And we played with Warren.
Warren. The treat for me, and you didn't know who he was because you're young.
And I'm ignorant.
Well, no, you were only 2 when he won the British Amateur Championships, but I knew the name straight away. When I saw the draw sheet, I knew who Warren was. And
this is Warren Hayden, for people who don't know.
Yeah, so he's the British Amateur Champion in 1996, and he was very cool, very calm, was quite happy to chat on the way round, telling us about his Masters tournament when he was the amateur champion. He obviously got an invite to the Masters, telling us about Nicholas and Arnold Palmer. They're the 2 that spring to mind. He might have played with Tiger Woods, I'm not sure, I can't remember. But really nice guy, really interested to see, I mean, he's an older player now, but really interested to see how he went about his game. So for me, that was the treat, to see him in action. Really good.
And he was on Big Break as well, wasn't he? That the golf show that used to be on Golf Channel.
And he was on Big Break, yeah. I mean, I suppose a lot of people aren't familiar with that program anymore, but for a while we were watching it on Golf Channel, and very entertaining that was, yeah.
Same series as Tommy Two Gloves Gainey.
That's correct, yeah, Tommy Two Gloves.
Love it. And I guess that's the beauty of the Open qualifying, right? Is you could literally be drawn with anyone.
Yeah, I mean, and so for me, even before you went out to play, that was, I mean, I'm guessing, I might be wrong, but I'm guessing he would have been one of the, based on history, but one of the best players you've played with. Even if he didn't quite replicate that form, he did a good round, didn't qualify, but I just thoroughly enjoyed listening to his stories. As I say, he was calm enough to want to talk. You know, I asked him, are you happy to have a chat? And he went, yeah. He carried his own bag. He drove up on the same morning. You know, so very calm player. And good to see him go about how he played golf. And, it's very good. Very well he played.
And you're a man in your 50s, and you're a very, very good single handicap golfer still.
Yes.
Fluctuating between 5 and 6 right now, that's fair to say, right?
Yes.
And so Warren, is similar age to you?
No, I think Warren's younger. I think Warren... I'm 57. I think Warren might be 5 years younger.
Okay. So, but it's still in the same ballpark. Yeah. What was his game like? What did you learn from him that day?
Well, his game was nothing like mine because he still hits the ball like the young players. You know, as you get older, you get a bit older, doddier. But he still played as if he could. He openly admitted that he doesn't bomb it out like the youngsters, the real big uns, but he just goes about his business, and he just was plotting his way round. He knew what he was doing. Missed some putts, then started holding some putts. He just knew that, with me, when I play golf, if I start missing putts, I'm going to miss them all day long. Whereas with him, he was missing some, but you knew that once he got his eye in, he'll start holding them. And in fact, that's pretty much what happened.
The finish was class, wasn't it?
Very classy, yeah. Very classy.
I think he finished it. The last 2 holes at St Anne's Old Links, for those who don't know, is 2 on the day pretty reachable par 5s. I guess it was playing downwind slightly, but I think Warren finished birdie eagle.
Yeah.
Maybe he finished 1 under, and the cut was 2 in the end. But it was interesting that he finished birdie eagle, and he knew that he'd come up short by 1. He didn't hang around. He just left straight away.
He did. Yeah, he did. He just said, okay, that's me done. I'm not making this. And he went. But,
and in the end, there ended up being a massive playoff as well. But he was class, though, and definitely good to learn from.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah, very classy man.
For sure. And in stark comparison, how did you enjoy your day caddying for me in that actual tournament?
Well, it was, you weren't quite on your game off the tee, were you? You know, normally you're strong off the tee. And unfortunately, we must have hit a provisional ball half a dozen times, if not more. Although never losing the ball, in fairness, but I think we were doing that in the end to keep up play, weren't we? More so.
Yeah.
We didn't want to have to walk back. So we always found the balls, but we kept reloading. But listen, I love it anyway. And, you've played better, but you didn't play. You had one hole where you got into a spot of bother, but that was because of penal rough. And the rest of the time, I thought you did all right. There were a couple of wonky ones, but I thought you played okay. But
we had a nice day.
never good. It was a lovely day, but never good enough to be anywhere near the qualifying. It was a bit sketchy, really, your game. But again, thoroughly enjoyed the experience. You know.
Yeah, exactly. And there was some vague excitement after the 9th, which I would consider to be one of the signature holes of the course, which is
Oh, yeah.
How do you describe the 9th?
Well, it's just what a hole it is. Again, you have to describe it to your listeners, but it's a fabulous hole. It's their signature hole, and it is a brilliant one. And, you birdied that, so you were in a little bit of contention. I forgot that.
Yeah, I think I was maybe 1 or 2 over half. I needed something good to happen on the back 9, but I needed something very good to happen on the back 9, and obviously it didn't happen because that's how the law of averages in golf works. But yeah, so the 9th hole is a par 3, and you're going straight back to the clubhouse. It's around 170 yards, 160 yards, like a decent mid-iron. And the green itself is in a valley, but it's not a valley that all campers down into the green. The green itself is long and thin, but it's guarded by 6 big pot bunkers, 2 at the front, 2 at the middle, 2 at the back, and thick rough on that valley all the way coming down to those bunkers. So you either have to be spot on into the thin part of the green, or you are in a world of hurt. And on the day we were spot on, so can't really complain.
No, it's just you got a 2 there, didn't you? You birdied it, and I think Warren birdied it as well, and I think poor old Mike went up in the rough stuff. So
up on the hill and took a few from there.
Yeah, but
so we saw everything that it had to offer.
Yeah, better to hit the green on that hole, I say.
yeah, for sure. Were there any other holes that stood out to you? What do you think of St Anne's as a course?
Well, it's a brilliant course. It's just fabulous. I mean, am I right in saying the British Amateur's going to be there this year? Is it got some involvement in the British Amateur?
Let's say I believe British Am's at Lytham this year, Royal Lytham, but there's going to be a qualifying round on St Anne's Old Links, and I believe there's a pre-qualifying happening.
Right.
Happening for the first time this year, and that's happening at St Anne's Old Links as well.
Okay, well, there you go. That's how good that course is then. What did you
like about it, though? Did you like the colour of the rough or the layout? There's a lot of par 4s to it. It ends with some par 5s, but it's not many. It's not loads of 5s and 3s going through it. It's a lot of just stern par 4s, I think.
Yeah, stern's a good word. I just love walking around it. You know, you had a nice day for it. Well, it wasn't too hot, wasn't too cold. I think I remember the ending probably because you finished off quite strongly, like with 5s and that. And but I just thought it was a good test, you know. And if you were slightly off the fairway, you were pretty punished, I think, you know. So again, I don't know if you've played too many courses quite like it. But it's certainly a good learning experience. And, when it comes down to the nitty gritty, I suppose it's one of the best courses I've ever had the pleasure to walk on.
Yeah, I think
really enjoyed it.
The greens were definitely pure, and that helped you make putts. But to access any of the flags, you had to be in the fairway, and the rough was penal. And I think when we were at Panmure in 2019, the rough was up, but I hit it as straight as I normally do, so we didn't really factor it in. And
you didn't get to see it,
You've kind of already said the rough was long at St Anne's, but you could still find your golf ball. I think there was one hole, maybe it was the 11th, 12th, maybe it's the 13th, where I hit it, and I only found it by standing like right next to it. Yeah. It was so thick and dense and just going in the wrong direction. And
you had to go backwards, I think, in the end.
I had to go backwards on that one. I think even then it was a struggle to get out backwards. It was so it was some seriously thick rough. It wasn't just wispy ryegrass, more like Scottish links. This was some real substantial grass. And then once you go in it, you then start thinking about it more off the tee. So everything suddenly became very narrow. So I wouldn't say St Anne's is the longest of courses, and it played a bit shorter for regional than it did final qualifying.
Did it?
I think they stuck some of the tees back for final, but just made some of the par fives longer, really. But you just have to be accurate, and you can definitely see how a score is out there. I think in final qualifying, Gonzalo Fernandez Castaño smashed it up and shot 13 under.
Did he?
And that's the kind of number you're looking at for 2 rounds. But so there's a score if you can hit it straight, and then there's a few wedges and par 5 opportunities. I think it's back-to-back par 5s on the front nine and on the back nine, isn't it? It finishes with back-to-back par 5s.
Yeah.
I believe the 5th and the 6th are par 5s as well.
Yeah.
So there's just the right amount of opportunity that if you could piece it together, then hold it together for the tough holes, that there's a score out there.
It's interesting. I remember that maybe the second par 5 you played, 6, whatever, you just went off the fairway a touch, and you weren't then being greedy. I think you realised you couldn't get far. I think you might even have just hit a wedge out, and the rough was so thick that your club twisted and you sent it going left into the other rough.
Into the other rough, I think on the day I definitely hit 5 shots trying to come out sideways or backwards. So that's how strong the rough. But
that's how, if you're going to qualify for Opens or final qualifyings, I would expect the courses to be like that. So at least you've had that experience playing them tough.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, so what did you think compared to 2019, which is the normal format?
Yeah.
What did you think of the adapted format as a result of the COVID limitations? So normally there's 13 local venues which feed into 4 different final venues. This time they just took the 4 final venues and had regional at them. It meant that we showed up, I believe, on a Thursday. We had practice potentially on a Friday. The tournament itself was a Saturday. Actually, I think we practiced on a Thursday, had a few days, then 2 days off before actually competing on a Sunday, and there were other people competing on a Saturday. And then if we'd made final, we would have had Monday to practice, and then Tuesday was the final. Yeah. So it was spread out over a good chunk of days, and that adds up financially. It also adds to the experience, I suppose.
Yeah.
But how did you find that in comparison to the normal format, which, well, for example, this year it's happening on June the 20th, 2022. That'd be Panmure. Yeah. And then on the 28th, it's happening. The final qualifying is happening for us at Fairmont St Andrews. So how would you contrast the two?
Well, and I know your podcast is about financial, but if you took the money out of it, we thoroughly enjoyed it.
Yeah.
It was just stayed in a nice hotel. As you said, visited friends, went out for dinner. It was nice, but obviously the Panmure experience is a one-day affair. And now you can drive to it, play your game and come back away, So for the Scottish golfers or sort of in the Fife area, the Panmure experience is a better one in terms of your pocket.
Yeah, it's just easier.
It's easier. So, but again, as I always say, I would never want the experience back again. We had fun.
Yeah.
It was, you can never tell what's going to happen. And it was just it was pretty much a week, wasn't it?
Well, yeah, in the end, I think we had the extra day just to go see Blackpool Seafront, which you've so glowingly referred to.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. But I prefer, the 13 course format.
Yeah.
Fair to everyone. I'm guessing a lot of Scottish players, amateurs, didn't come down for a 5-mile journey. A 5-hour journey.
Yeah.
To play in in Blackpool.
That's a really good point, because it's interesting that Blackpool was the closest qualifying venue for anyone. That was the most northerly venue.
Yes.
So that's a lot of people who live above that, where it makes it a difficult journey for them.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting. I'd love to know what the actual reasoning was for that decision by the RNA.
I would have thought they could have slipped a Scottish venue in.
Yeah, well, especially when the normal final qualifying is at the Fairmont. And they deliberately took it away from the Fairmont and gave West Lancs the tournament. So it's an interesting one.
Yeah. But ultimately, I mean, it was a good venue. I mean, how many people were at Panmure? Like 90 in 2019?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So how many people were because there was about 30-odd qualifying spots for St Anne's, wasn't there? So there must have been, like they obviously made it easy. Well, not easy at the qualify, it's never easy, but obviously there was more numbers to filter through to the final qualifying, which I'm guessing was stand to reason. So I can't recall, was it a couple of hundred? Would it have been as many as that? Or was, 10?
Yeah, so I've got it here. So the regional qualifying, it was around 25 at each venue made it through, and it was out of 144.
Okay, right, fair enough, yeah.
At each of the 4 venues. So overall, you still had,
still difficult.
Like 550 players competing.
Yeah.
So it's still pretty open. And what was interesting was that it was still, entries were done on a first come, first serve basis, which is always the case. But they still had a struggle trying to fill up some of the venues. I think Prince's went straight away.
Yeah.
I believe there were still spaces left at West. I think St Anne's went pretty quickly, but it's still at West Lancs. And what was the other one? And Hollingwell, and not Hollingwell.
Yeah.
So interesting how, even though we think it's such good value and we always have a great time doing it, there isn't the overall demand for it that the spaces sell out very quickly.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose a lot of people, I don't look at it like this, but a lot of people may look at it and say, well, I've got no chance of qualifying, so I'm going to keep my 150 in my wallet. And I get that, I understand that. However, you just never know what could happen. So, if you love golf and if you're a good player and you're good enough to get in the, your handicap is low enough, why wouldn't you try? I mean, maybe that was last year was a bit different because of the 4 venues. Maybe this year it'll be better for everybody. It's a relatively shorter journey for everybody. That may have had something to do with it.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And
actually, for the record, I just checked. It was 1 under was the cut at regional at St Anne's to make it to the final qualifying.
Okay.
And then there was the playoff of 19 players for 8 spots, which went over into the next day because they were still playing at 11 p.m. that night. I believe by that point we were well and truly tucked in bed watching the Euros, just having a good time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other final comments, Father, to cap off our 2021 Open qualifying reminiscence?
Well, it's as you know, I always love caddying for you. To me, it's a really big event. I mean, I haven't had the chance to caddy for you in anything bigger than that at the moment. So it's the biggest and best event I've ever had the chance to caddy in. I like all the bits and the pieces around it. I feel like I'm in the Open. I feel like when Morikawa won it, he beat you to win it.
At St. George's, yeah. No, he just edged me out of the title, yeah.
He edged you out. But I just think, it's like a lot of the guys who try to enter, you never can tell. So for that reason, it's it will always go down as one of my favourite experiences. It's the RNA always do it well. It's a fantastic experience. The volunteers are great. And maybe next time your golf will be good enough to get you into the final qualifier. Who knows? Let's hope so.
That's really well summarised. Out of interest, just one final question. If you're an elite amateur golfer, do you think that the Open qualifying, regional and final, is a bigger deal than the British Amateur? Given that the British Amateur is going to Lytham this year.
Oh, it's a good question, because some of the elite amateurs have got a chance of. They are up against the pros as well, aren't they? Like decent pros in the final qualifying, like very decent pros. Castagno obviously winning the final qualifier at St Anne's. Listen, if you said to me, do you want to play in the Open, and to do it you can have the British Amateur, I'll have the British Amateur all day long. So I'd like to win the British Amateur.
And then get into the Open that way.
And get into the Open that way, and the Masters. And I think there's a couple of professional events you can play as well.
Exactly.
But I'm greedy, so I'd like it all. But I must say there's probably more chance for an elite amateur to get to the Open. Yeah, I don't know. I think it is a 50-50, because there's some outstanding professionals who will play in the final qualifying. And as you know, there's only 3 or 4 that get through. So, it's a stellar field, and, you have to shoot a remarkable scores to get through. So maybe the British Amateur, for what that brings and the kudos that it brings, I think that'd be a nice one to win.
Or maybe this year we'll have to try and get the handicap down, try and enter it, and we can actually have a comparison by travelling back to Blackpool and stay at the same hotel, and we can well and truly compare for ourselves if British Amateur is better than the Open. But for now, I think we have to say that regional and final Open qualifying is a very fun time, good experience, and we would thoroughly recommend it to everyone for the £150 entry fee.
We would.
And everything else that comes with it.
Of course.
That adds to the cost.
maybe next time we'll go to see the zoo. Who knows?
We'll go to see the zoo. That is a deal.
Okay.
Right. Thanks, Dad.
Okay, then. Be seeing you.
All right. See you later.
Bye-bye.
Bye. So that was every practical thing you needed to know about how 2021 Regional Open qualifying worked. If there's anything major that I've missed out, that you would like to have heard, or that would have been useful for your future planning or even my future planning for events, then get in touch with the podcast. We're on Instagram and YouTube as the Free Relief Golf Podcast, so follow and subscribe to those for all episode updates. And you can always get in touch with me personally at freddielawrence.golf@gmail.com. I'd love to hear any feedback you've got to make future episodes specific to what you'd like to hear. Now, next time, the 2022 season begins. We're going to be playing the Craig Miller Park Open on the 9th and 10th of April in Edinburgh. And this tournament, I'm excited to say, will also mark the launch of my new subscription-based bonus podcast series, The Follow Through, which will cover my personal golfing progress throughout the course of the season. You might have noticed that I do not normally talk about my results in these tournaments, as the sole focus is on cost and logistics. But there has, however, been demand from you, the listeners, to hear more about events taking place on the course and how my own game shapes up in comparison to the best on the elite amateur circuit. So the follow through will literally allow you to follow me through my season, with the focus being on my game, my results, and basically my entire golfing life. I'll be sharing how my practice has been going and how my game feels going into tournaments, how those tournament results are going for me, and afterwards I'll be reflecting on what I can learn moving forward. So if you'd like to support me in making these podcasts while I try to be the best golfer I can be, then please sign up on Spotify for a monthly subscription fee. I will also be setting up a Patreon platform too, with other support options available. The podcast will provide regular, raw content from the tournament sites themselves, and it promises to be a different style of series altogether. More spontaneous, more relatable, and, let's face it, for most of you, more interesting. Until then, I've been Freddie. You've been lovely. See you next time.